Okay, so we'll start off with a little bit of backstory on Shammos and Rex, the Hoblin King. Now, Shammos was added as an NPC in the version 49 update alongside Leafrey and Fourth Job, and a few other things in that patch. His personal quests lead up to the eventual party quest, the Resurrection of the Hobbling King, which was released in version 90, the Fall Effect update. Now, I haven't been able to pinpoint when exactly, but at some point, Shammos' quests were revamped, changing the story of them slightly. The most interesting thing about him, though, is that he's actually the individual that teaches mages how to use Meteor Shower, Blizzard, and Genesis. Anyway, to begin with, it's important to know that Shammos is essentially being held prisoner beneath the chief's residence in Nath. He's a little bit insane, and this is just because of magic. You'll find out why later. I usually try to explain the quests in their actual order by level or order of doing them, or just by character if it's an area. But I'm going to be skipping around a little bit so that it makes more narrative sense. So, all the way back when Fourth Job skill quests were still a thing, in the Bowmaster skill quest for Concentrate, you come across a storybook that mentions mastery of a skill known as Eye of the Heart. Both Athena Pierce and the chief bowman of Nath, Renee, don't know anything about it, but while you're speaking to Renee, you overhear Shammos talking to someone downstairs. You go down and investigate, and he's talking to himself, just rambling about how bowmen are foolish, but he does ask to have a look at the book, which he recognizes, but says he doesn't need it, and that no one alive knows about the book. And you speak to Renee, who tells you that Shammos used to be a human and very intelligent, and while he speaks in wicked ways, he's still very wise, and you should take him seriously, as he only appears crazy. And she recommends you find someone who isn't alive by traveling to Sleepywood to ask about the book. And she also says that according to Shammos, some of the trainees from Sleepywood may know about the ultimate skill, and that the Rememberer has been training for a long time. He might be the person to speak to. But that's about the extent of his involvement in it. So at some point, if you were an explorer mage, the chief magician of Nath, Robeira, wants to show a book to you. And she asks you to travel to Helios Tower and visit Wiz the librarian. And he hands the book to you, and then asks you to give it to Grendel the really old after reading it, but you need to be extra careful with it. The description of the particular item says that it's a book that chronicles the life of a magician who, despite showing signs of pure genius, managed to fall in love with banned magic and became a mad magician. When you get to Grendel, he tells you that he has various books to study, but it's still hard to be a master, which is why he requested the book. The book itself is about a genius in magic who was talented with a pure passion for magic, which unfortunately led him astray. And he tested the limits of magic until he threatened the balance of the world, turning into a hobby, or hobie, basically a goblin. This magician is none other than Shammos himself. And Grendel says that Gritto, who is the master instructor for Fourth Job from Leafrey, said that it was better to get rid of him. Though Robeira and Grendel both refused to kill their friend. Grendel decided to imprison Shammos instead, but it's been quite a long time since he's seen him, so he wants you to check on Shammos for him. And when you get there, you find Shammos raving to himself. But you ask him about Grendel, and Shammos says that he was once a friend of his that betrayed him, and Grendel was jealous and took all of his power with the help of Robeira, and then imprisoned him. When you return to Grendel, he asks if Shammos had come back to his senses, and he tells you that Shammos is really talented. He lost all his memory as a human, but his memory is somehow coming back to him. Long ago, they were friends, but they didn't keep in touch for a long time as they were learning magic. And Grendel hadn't known that Shammos indulged in that kind of magic, and then the next time they met, Shammos was a hobby, or hobie. He's aware that Shammos still blames him and Robeira for being in prison, and he claims that Shammos would be a living legend had his magic skills not been so dangerous. He does feel kind of bad though, so he asks you to deliver his apology to Shammos. And when you return, Shammos seems kind of sad and asks you to tell Robeira to just set him free. But when you speak to Robeira, she tells you that she feels pity for him, but he threatened the entire Maple world, and she'll never let him walk away free. But she can't kill him either, because he still has a mission to complete. She tells you that if he says anything else strange, to let her know. So when you speak to him, he kind of seems to have regained consciousness as if part of his memory has returned. And when you talk to him next, depending on what magician class you were, you could then learn your ultimate skill from him. As a fire poison mage, he would ask you to help him by bringing him an eye of fire by seeing the guard of the abandoned mine, Adobus. After retrieving that for him, he teaches you the powerful magic of Meteor Shower. As an ice lightning mage, he would ask you to bring a cold heart of a wolf, which you obtain from a lycanthrope in the wolf territory of the Nath Mountains. After retrieving that for him, he teaches you the powerful magic of Blizzard. And if you were a bishop, he would ask you to bring him life roots from the Cave of Life, which is a lot more difficult to obtain than the other two items. Eventually, when you return with the life roots, he teaches you the powerful magic of Genesis. Now, at some other time, Shammos reaches out to you, and you meet with him in the basement of the chief's residence in Nath. He asks you not to be alarmed by his appearance, and asks for help completing a ritual with an item called the Contract of Darkness from Purion. You meet with Magi, who asks how you're even aware of it. He's heard about it himself from someone in Nath, and wanted to learn about it himself. And he says that the Contract of Darkness is a terrifying force that causes creatures that are supposedly dead to still move around as if alive. It's the source of power for all zombies, written on a raggedy old paper that details the contract with the dark forces. And he doesn't tell you where to possibly get this item, but you do eventually find it from monsters in Nath. Now, this quest was changed a little bit over time. Instead of going to Purion, and instead of talking with Manji, you're instead sent to Alcaster, because Shammos has researched the Contract of Darkness for a very long time, but hasn't come up with many leads, aside from that Alcaster knows something about the Contract of Darkness. If you go to Alcaster and you tell him that somebody asked for it, he tells you it's very dangerous and you should just stop talking about that subject. And then that's kind of it. But if you instead tell him that you heard about it in your travels, he says that you've probably never seen a monster risen like an abomination in your travels. The undead should not exist, but the Contract of Darkness creates them, and it's a source of pure evil. You're led to believe you might be able to find it if you defeat zombies. Alcaster tells you that you would have to risk your own life to get it, and even if you do manage to find it, you'll be something. He doesn't even finish the sentence, so you don't know. But he does tell you to stay out of the Dead Tree Forest. So, naturally, you go to the Dead Tree Forest and you retrieve it from a zombie eventually, and the description of the item itself says something different than the original description. This time it says, the source of power to those who have died and cannot return. The old paper shows a contract with the devil, along with the devil's seal. Anyway, you just get it, and you give it to Shammos for whatever reason, and then that's the end of the quest. He doesn't really say anything other than like, thanks, I'll call you later. But some other time, he asks you to retrieve Poison Poopa's poisonous spikes and needles, but refuses to inform you about what it's for. If instead you choose to help him, rather than bringing him these suspicious materials, he tells you that his hands are stained by the countless sins he's committed, and he's been placed under the watchful eye of the wise men at the chief's residence. He has been reading books on medicine and criminal psychology though, and thinks that if he has a more balanced diet, he can improve his habits and tendencies. So he needs small eggs and Junior Pepe's fish. If you do this quest instead, it'll set him along a better path, and it'll disable the other quest. And it's kind of likewise for the other one. So later on, the Hobbling King was added to the game, and they did a couple quests to explain the lore of that. So at some point, Shammos calls upon you, and he tells you that he isn't human, but part of the Hoblin race. He isn't actually sure though, and is just going off what other people have told him. He doesn't know who he is, or why he's trapped in the basement of the chief's residence in Nath, and it's frustrating for him to just not remember much of anything. Now, he's been going a little crazy lately as he's been bombarded with images of a house, town, human friends. He says that the memories are full of happiness, but when he concentrates, they slip away and he starts to go a little insane. He does say that he has a lead on recovering his past though. Someone found his diary in Nath, as his name was written on the cover. The insides are a little messed up though, and it's missing specifically pages 5 through 9. The person who brought him his diary claimed that they found it among the Hectors and Whitefangs in the cold snowfields. Shammos assumes that they might have the missing pages as well. You go around and you collect them, and eventually Shammos writes you a letter that tells you that they were a great help and that he's starting to understand who he is. His memory still comes and goes, but he's learned of something very dangerous that'll happen soon, and he will need your help. From what he can remember, his people, the Hoblins, had a very powerful king, and his name was Rex. It was very difficult to remember that name though, and once he did, he was overtaken by emotions of fear and hatred that caused him to go insane for days. It was a powerful hatred that fed him unfathomable strength. I don't know. But he needs to find out what happened to Rex, and directs you to ask the chiefs of Nath about what to do. When you head upstairs and you speak with Tylus, the chief warrior of Nath, he tells you that your curiosity is unwarranted, but suggests that you go speak with Robeira, who knows Shammos better than anyone. Now she tells you that there's just no way Shammos could even know about Rex, as Rex appeared years after Shammos had lost his memory, and she's sure that they didn't know each other before that, so it just makes no sense. She goes on to tell you that Rex was once a human, a famous hunter, and he battled evil in Nath, which brought the attention of an evil organization called the Tarheeds, a menace that terrorized all of Nath. Now one day, while Rex was out hunting, the Tarheeds attacked Rex's house and murdered his wife. Rex vowed vengeance and stormed into the Tarheed base alone, but he couldn't take them all at once and barely escaped with his life. Afterwards, he disappeared. And many years later, Hoblins appeared in Nath and attacked the Tarheeds to take their place, and their leader was Rex. Now, no one knows how he became a Hoblin, but he had lost all of his humanity, and he was full of hatred, and after destroying the Tarheeds, his next target was Nath. The other elders, along with Robeira, joined forces with adventurers to fight a very difficult battle, which they won, but she says that countless friends were lost in the process. Rex was sealed in an ancient glacier by a great magician named Heinrich, so currently Rex is as good as dead right now. She does have you tell Shammos to calm down and keep quiet because she doesn't want him spreading fear, and she mentions that Shammos really just should not be trusted, because there's a reason why he's locked up. But you return to Shammos and you tell him that Rex lost all of his powers and was sealed up, so he doesn't need to worry. But Shammos says that he knows something's gonna happen. And he also says to keep your friendship with him a secret, as the chiefs of Nath are kind of close-minded and probably wouldn't approve. Sometime later, Robeira contacts you to tell you that she's received reports of Hoblin movement recently. They've been spotted near the Ice Gorge. She's worried about the way that Shammos has been acting as well, so she asks you to find out whatever you can from him. And he tells you that Rex, the Hobbling King, has returned. Robeira should have heeded his warning, because now Rex's resurrection is at hand. And he has you tell Robeira that his memory has returned and that Rex's seal is weakening, and Shammos needs to seal him up again before he can resurrect. You go up to Robeira and you ask who Shammos is and why he would say something like that. And she tells you that he's important, or would be, if his mind were all there. But she can't go into all the details currently. And when his mind is normal though, his magical abilities rival Gritto's, who again is the 4th job master magician instructor. But Shammos is dangerous and cannot be sent to the seal alone. So she asks you to gather a few allies and escort Shammos to deal with the Hobbling King. When you do finally gather some allies and you meet with Shammos, he tells you that the seal stone that is binding Rex is losing power, and you'll need to protect him as you're being attacked by his minions to make sure that he can reach Rex's location safely. So you first travel to the ancient glacial water, a special glacier that heals those around it. And he tells you if anything goes wrong, you'll need to heal him up a little bit with the ancient glacial water. You then head into the cave where Rex has been sealed, where Shammos just instantly betrays you and breaks the seal instead of repairing it, freeing Rex, and then says that you're fools and that the Hobbling King will now destroy everybody. So you defeat Rex, the Hobbling King, and then that's kind of it. There's no dialogue at the end of the party quest, but you can return to Robeira afterwards if you've done the quests. And she says that she's heard the news that you were able to reseal Rex, but she was foolish to have even trusted Shammos, but she's relieved that you were with him. She says that he's also lost his power and is back to his crazy old self again, but he'll be watched a lot more carefully from now on. And she tells you more about Shammos, that he was once a great magician, but he crossed a line and challenged the source of life itself, a mistake that can never be forgiven. And that's why he's confined under the chief's care. Shammos is very cunning and more dangerous than you can imagine, as he was behind everything that happened with Rex. So that's about it for Shammos' lore. There's not actually too much to it, but I feel like there's enough to make it interesting. I do wonder what Robeira meant when she mentioned that Shammos still has a mission, and that it's the reason why she's keeping him alive. But I would have liked to see them explore that eventually, but Nexon's shift to the main story doesn't lead too much to side character development, and especially for the older NPCs or older areas. I do think that some of the quests were meant to lead into the concept of Shammos setting up the resurrection of the Hobbling King, like collecting the Contract of Darkness, which is what reanimates dead creatures, or like collecting the poison poopas spikes and the pinboom needles, but I have no idea what those would have been for, because it doesn't come up in anything else. But what I don't understand is like why he would even have anything to do with Hoblins, because he was once a human who had transformed himself into a Hoblin, a hobby, whatever. And if he was helping resurrect the Hobbling King, which he really shouldn't have anything to do with, right? Why would Rex's minions even attack Shammos? I don't know, it just seems like the various quests all seem to like contradict themselves a little bit. Like in some, Shammos is depicted as like Smeagol or like Gollum-esque, where he's crazy and like raving to himself in the third person. But at some points he seems perfectly fine. Like by the end of the 4th job mage quests, he essentially regains his memories enough to teach you some of the most powerful spells, but then in the Hobbling King quests, he needs to read his diary to regain his memories. There's also the difference between saying he's a hobby, but also Hoblin, but I guess they have different names. I just assume that they're the same thing. But if they would just have read the previous 3 quests or whatever, they would have seen that one word and they could have just, consolidated or something. Like they don't have to come up with multiple terms or whatever. And it kind of seems like they came up with the Tarheeds thing out of nowhere. Like that's not an organization or anything that's ever been mentioned anywhere else. But that would have been cool if there was like more lore behind that. I think I really like the concept of Shammos just acting like he's mad, as he's like sort of playing the long game or something, which is sort of what Renee alludes to, I think. That might be giving Nexon like too much credit. If that were to be the case, it would kind of explain away a lot of the inconsistencies. Anyway, I've worked on organizing the Nath stuff for a while, and like Von Leon, and with the actual insane amount of lore in that region, I think it's just best to split it up into smaller scale sections, and I thought Shammos' story was super interesting, so yeah. But anyway, if there's anything important that I'm missing, let me know.